The market smelled of sweat and copper and old bread. Stalls leaned into one another like tired bodies. Vendors shouted over one another, hawking salted fish and cracked honey jars, bolts of thread, scraps of iron. Lanterns swung from ropes and threw their weak circles of yellow light across muddy lanes. By day the square would be a tangle of trade and rumor. Tonight it had become a place of barter for something far uglier. A line of iron and chains, and a raised platform where men were sold like broken tools. Lyra kept her hands folded into the pocket of her thin cloak, pressing the small coin pouch flat against her palm, as if she could feel the weight of what remained. One by one, she counted 3 small coins and a copper plate she'd pawned last week. They were nothing, and yet they felt like a fortress in her fist. Her brother's cough had started last month. The apothecary wanted twice as much as she had. Her mother's eyes had gone hollow with hunger. There had been a winter of promises and not enough bread to keep them. And Lyra had come to the market with a single plan, to turn these last coins into medicine. But the night had teeth. The auction's crowd pushed and jostled, as if every shoulder could break the system in favor of those who had less. Lyra moved along the periphery, invisible by choice, watching the men and women who were called forward. There were children, eyes too old for their faces. There was a blacksmith's apprentice, with a smear of coal still on his cheek. A woman whose hair had been shaved in the humiliation of sale. They stepped up in sequence. Names shouted, numbers tallied, hands slapped flat on the ledger. Then she saw him. He was a shadow wrapped in coarse cloth, wrists ironed to thick links of chain. Even as the sunlight waned, there was a presence about him, a pulled-in silence that made the market's clamor thin at the edges. Men moved around him, like water around a rock. He did not plead. He did not beg. He lay, like a wounded hawk, chest rising, slow, and scarred, hair clotted. And when he turned his head, the world shifted. Eyes that were not quite the pale brown of men, and not quite the gold of beasts, fixed on the crowd with a slow, terrible intelligence. Lyra felt it then, not pity exactly, but an odd, magnetic tug in her chest, as if something inside her recognized a shape long buried. She wrapped her fingers tighter around her pouch. Her small coins suddenly felt unbearably loud. The auctioneer's voice rose, sharp, practiced. Next, he barked. A noble in a purple sash stepped forward and laughed, running a hand over the chains as if inspecting a prize. The crowd began to murmur. Eager fingers already poised to fling more coin into the basin. Lyra's breath fogged in the cold air. She could walk away. She could let the man melt into another poor fate and take her last coins home for bread. She could live on guilt and the memory of not having acted. She did not move. The noble in purple tugged the prisoner's chin upward, forcing his face into the lantern glow. The man's jaw was cut from stone, lines of exhaustion buried beneath dirt and blood. Yet nothing about him seemed broken. Even with chains biting his wrists, even with bruises shadowing his throat, he looked like a storm waiting for the first crack of thunder. The auctioneer smirked. "Captured in the northern ranges," he said, voice oily with pride. "They say he fought 10 men before being bound. Strong arms, young, not yet 30. He'll serve well in a mine or on a battlefield." Opening bid, 50 silvers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. 50 silvers could buy land, 2 horses, or a lifetime's worth of bread. Lyra's hand trembled against her pouch, where 3 small coins clinked together like a cruel joke. She told herself, again, walk away. But her eyes betrayed her. drawn back to him again and again. The shackled man lifted his gaze. For a heartbeat, his eyes locked with hers. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She swore the world went mute, as if every voice had been muffled, every lantern dimmed. His eyes were silver, not pale gray, not the cloudy shade of a prisoner beaten down, but molten, glowing faintly like moonlight caught in water. No human eyes had ever looked like that. He didn't flinch. He studied her, as if he had known her face all his life and had been waiting in chains only to see it again. Lyra stumbled back a step, pulse hammering against her ribs. The noble slapped his shoulder. Doesn't look like much now, but with training, the man's head turned slowly toward the noble, and though he did not speak, the air thickened. Even bound, even broken, there was a command in the tilt of his chin, the flare of his nostrils, the calm in his silence. The noble's voice faltered, words tripping over sudden unease. The crowd whispered, "Not normal." To calm. "Look at his eyes." Lyra hugged her cloak tighter around her, trying to understand what she was feeling. Fear, yes. But underneath it, something else, a warmth that felt like recognition, like a dangerous secret whispering only to her. The auctioneer's mallet slammed down on the block. 55 silvers from Lord Ashen. Do I hear 60? Coins clattered into the basin. Nobles raised their hands, voices loud, eager. Lyra could barely hear them. All she could hear was the echo of her own heartbeat, and the quiet, steady gaze of the shackled man that seemed to burn a single word into her mind. Mine. 60 silvers. A merchant barked from the left, his robe glittering with coins stitched right into the hem. 70. Shouted another. The basin at the front filled with silver and clinks, each coin falling like a nail sealing the prisoner's fate. Lyra's stomach twisted. The number was absurd. She could feed her entire family for years on 70 silvers. Yet here men tossed them like scraps to prove their power. The prisoner did not move. He didn't even glance at the crowd clamoring for him. His gaze was still fixed on her, calm, relentless, as though he hadn't heard a single bid. Cried Lord Ashen again, face red with determination. He licked his lips, as though already imagining the prisoner breaking rocks beneath a whip. 8. Another noble sneered at him, delighted at the contest. The crowd cheered, hungry for spectacle. Lyra's fingers dug into her pouch. 3 coins. Worthless against 8. She should run. It was madness even to stand here, feeling that piercing stare tear through her ribs. 100. Lord Ashen roared, throwing a pouch of silver that landed with a dull, heavy thud. The crowd gasped and then broke into chatter. No one will outbid me now. The auctioneer grinned, mallet ready. 100 silvers to Lord Ashen. Going once, Lyra's throat burned. The man on the block, the storm in chains, leaned forward just slightly. Not toward Ashen, toward her. His lips parted, silent, but she knew what he was saying. She could see the shape of the word on his mouth. Mine. The world tilted. Without thinking, Lyra shoved her way to the front, cloak snagging on elbows and shoulders. The auctioneer blinked down at her, brows lifting in irritation. She held up her pouch, her voice raw but clear. 3 coins. Laughter ripped through the square like thunder. 3. Someone scoffed. Buy yourself a candle, girl. Another jeered. Lord Ashen's face darkened with amusement and cruelty. Pathetic beggar. Crawl back to your hovel. The auctioneer smirked, ready to wave her off, but then the prisoner moved. Slowly, with the deliberate clank of chains, he straightened. His head lifted fully into the light, and his voice came low, rough, but filled with a command that cut the laughter like a blade. "She bids. I accept." The square froze. Even the auctioneer's mallet hung midair. The nobles exchanged nervous looks. No prisoner was supposed to speak, let alone declare his own fate. Lyra's heart stopped. His eyes locked with hers, silver burning like fire under the moon. She felt her knees weaken, but stood rooted, the pouch trembling in her grip. The auctioneer sputtered, "Excellence him. He belongs," but no one moved. The prisoner's voice had carried something ancient, something too heavy for chains to hold. Lord Ashen snarled, "He is mine for 100 silvers." The prisoner smiled faintly, wolfish. "No, I am hers." The air thickened. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers running like wildfire. "Not normal, dangerous. Who is he?" Lyra's hand went slack around the coins. Somehow, impossibly, her worthless bid had been sealed. The silence after his words was unbearable. The auctioneer's mouth opened and closed like a fish dragged from water, yet no sound came out. All around the square, people muttered, shifting on their feet, suddenly uncertain if they had just witnessed defiance or destiny. Lyra's pulse hammered in her ears. She hadn't moved, so she hadn't chosen. And yet, the entire weight of his declaration had settled on her shoulders as if she had spoken it herself. Lord Ashen stepped forward, face purple with rage. "Guards, chain his tongue if you must. He is mine, paid for in full." The prisoner turned his head, very slowly, silver eyes catching the light. A low sound rumbled in his chest. Not a word, not even a growl exactly, but something primal. Enough to freeze the guards mid-step. It vibrated through the boards beneath Lyra's boots, through the marrow of her bones. Then he spoke again, voice calm, absolute. "She saved me. She owns me. And she belongs to me." Gasps rippled through the square. "Belongs to me." Not a plea, not gratitude, a claim. The words wrapped around Lyra like invisible chains, equal parts terrifying and electrifying. The guards faltered, looking to the auctioneer, who wrung his hands nervously. None dared move. Lyra's breath caught as the prisoner took a step forward. The chains bit into his wrists, but they groaned as if they feared him, metal trembling under the strain. His gaze never wavered from hers. "Say the word," he murmured, voice so low she almost thought she'd imagined it, "and I'll tear these bonds apart." Her mouth went dry. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She only knew that her life had shifted, tilting on a knife-dash edge, and in the middle of the stunned, restless crowd, a truth became undeniable. The shackled stranger had chosen her, and nothing would unmake that choice. The auctioneer finally snapped, slamming his mallet down hard enough to splinter the block. "Seize him. Seize them both." The command broke the crowd's paralysis. Guards surged forward, spears gleaming, chains rattling as they moved to subdue the prisoner. Lyra stumbled back, her meager pouch of coins spilling to the dirt. No one even glanced at them. All eyes were on the man in chains. He rose to his full height. It was as though the chains had never been meant to hold him at all. Metal strained, links screeching, the air humming with something too wild to belong to this marketplace. The first guard thrust a spear toward his chest. With a single jerk of his arms, the prisoner snapped the chain taut, yanking the weapon out of the man's grip. The guard went sprawling into the crowd, cries erupting all around. Panic spread like fire. People shoved, shouted, tripped over one another in their scramble to escape. Lyra found herself caught between flight and paralysis. She should run. She should leave this madman, this stranger with wolf eyes and impossible strength. Yet when the chaos reached for her, when rough hands tried to drag her back into the mob, it was his gaze that cut through the noise. "Here," he growled. Voice sharp as steel. She moved without thinking, clutching the chain that still bound his wrist. The moment her fingers brushed cold iron, something flared. Heat, power, a jolt that stole her breath. The guards closed in, shouts rising. But the prisoner leaned close, his voice for her alone. "Stay with me, and I'll get us out." Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs as the square dissolved into chaos. And she realized she had just chained herself to a storm. Lyra barely had time to breathe before the storm she had chained herself to yanked her forward. The prisoner, no, the man with silver eyes, ripped the broken length of chain from the post and barreled into the panicked crowd. She stumbled after him, cloak snagging against elbows and shoulders, the air filled with screams and the crack of splintering wood. "Move," he snarled, his voice carrying like thunder over the chaos. People scattered, too afraid to block his path. Lyra clung to the iron links, her wrist burning as he dragged her through the market. "Wait, I can't." Her protest broke into a gasp as her feet caught on uneven cobblestones. He caught her before she fell, his grip rough but unyielding, then hauled her onward as though she weighed nothing. Behind them, the guards had regrouped. Boots pounded the earth, shouts rang out, "Stop them! Don't let him get away!" The metallic shriek of weapons, unsheathed, pierced the night. Lyra glanced back. Spears and torches bobbed like angry fireflies as the guards stormed after them. Her lungs screamed for air, but fear drove her forward. The man cut a path through overturned stalls and scattering chickens, never faltering, his strength terrifying in its certainty. At every turn, Lyra expected him to stumble, to fall beneath the weight of his chains. Instead, it was as if the shackles were nothing but ornaments, as though he'd been waiting for this moment to run. A fruit cart toppled in their wake, apples rolling underfoot. Lyra nearly slipped, but his hand shot out again, steadying her, dragging her against his chest for a heartbeat before shoving her back into motion. His skin was burning hot, fevered almost, yet she felt safer pressed to him than she had in years. Where are you taking me?" She gasped between ragged breaths. His eyes flicked down at her, sharp even in the chaos. "Away," he said simply. As if that single word was enough, as if his will alone carved the path through the madness. Lyra didn't know if she was running for her life or being dragged deeper into a fate she couldn't escape. But when the guards' shouts grew louder, when the spearheads glinted closer, she tightened her hold on the chain. She had chosen him, somehow, in front of everyone. And now, running through the darkness, with the storm pulling her along, she wondered if she'd doomed them both. The narrow alleys spat them out into a wider lane, hemmed in by crumbling walls and shuttered windows. Lyra's lungs burned, her legs shaking, but the man didn't slow. His stride devoured the ground, dragging her with a merciless pace. Then the lane ended. A wall loomed ahead, high and slick with moss, impossible to climb. Wooden crates and broken barrels lay piled against it, forming a barricade. Lyra skidded to a halt. No, we're trapped." Her voice cracked, panic rising sharp in her throat. She yanked at the chain binding them together, desperate, but the iron held fast. Behind them, the guards thundered closer, their torches flaring, shouts echoing through the alley like hounds on a trail. This way. They're cornered. The prisoner turned, eyes narrowing. No panic touched his face. He took one step back, testing the chains that cut into his wrists. Then, with a sharp exhale, he surged forward. "Wait, what are you?" Lyra barely got the words out before he ripped the chain taut and swung it down. The first blow smashed through a stack of barrels, wood exploding in a spray of splinters. The second shattered a crate, apples and rotten cloth scattering across the cobblestones. The barricade groaned, the heap of junk shifting. He planted his foot against the wall, yanked once more, and the chain snapped a plank free with a screech. The whole barricade collapsed in a crash that drowned out the guards' shouts. Lyra flinched back, shielding her face from flying debris. When she looked up, a narrow gap had opened through the mess, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. "Go," he ordered, his voice deep. Commanding. She hesitated, chest heaving. "You're insane. Go." The single word rolled through her, brooking no argument. Lyra ducked, crawling through the jagged splinters. Her cloak tore, her hands scraped. But she shoved herself forward until she stumbled into the darkness beyond. He followed, chains dragging, shoulders hunched to fit through. Behind them, the guards shouted in fury, hacking at the debris with blades, but the wreckage slowed them. In the brief quiet on the other side, Lyra pressed against the wall, clutching her raw palms. Her heart hammered like a trapped bird. The man straightened, chest rising, silver eyes glowing faint in the torchlight that leaked through the gap. He didn't look winded. He looked alive. "You're welcome," he said, as though smashing through barricades with nothing but chains was the simplest thing in the world. Lyra stared at him, torn between fear and awe. "You're not. You can't be just a man." His smile was faint, almost dangerous. "No, I'm not." The faint smile lingered on his lips, unsettling, almost taunting. Before Lyra could summon a reply, he gripped the chain between them and tugged her deeper into the shadows. The alley curved sharply, narrowing until the walls almost touched their shoulders. Damp stone dripped with mildew, the air colder, heavier. Lyra hesitated. "There's nothing here, just a dead end." "Look closer." His voice was low, like gravel against steel. She squinted. At first, only blank stone. Then barely visible a seam, a faint outline of a doorway etched into the wall. Her stomach flipped. He pressed his palm against the stones. Nothing. Then, with a forceful shove, the wall groaned and swung inward, revealing a narrow gap blacker than night. Lyra stepped back. "That's impossible." He glanced at her, eyes glowing faint in the dark. "You paid for me, girl. Did you really think you bought a man who bends to ordinary walls?" Her breath caught, words tumbling out before she could stop them. "What are you?" "Later," he said, pulling her inside. The passage swallowed them. The wall sealed shut behind, cutting off the torchlight and the furious shouts outside. For a moment, silence. Lyra's heartbeat roared in her ears. She clutched the chain, fingers trembling. The air was thick with dust and old stone, carrying the faint metallic temps of rust. A dim glow stirred. Not from torches, but from the man himself, his eyes glimmering silver, throwing slivers of light across the walls. The sight rooted Lyra where she stood. "You're glowing," she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he moved, guiding her forward. The tunnel twisted downward, lined with jagged stones and roots that clawed through the cracks. Water dripped from above, echoing through the silence. Lyra stumbled, nearly falling. His hand shot out, catching her elbow. His grip was strong, steady, sending a jolt of heat through her arm. She jerked away. "Don't touch me." For the first time, his expression shifted, more curious than offended. "You'd rather fall." "I'd rather not be dragged into God's know what, with a stranger who breaks walls and glows." Her voice trembled, though she tried to harden it. He tilted his head, studying her like she was more puzzle than girl. Then, quietly, "Stranger. You spent your last coin on me." "That doesn't sound like a stranger." Her chest tightened. The truth of his words stung. She looked away, swallowing hard. The tunnel stretched ahead, opening at last into a wider chamber. Ancient carvings scarred the stone wolves etched in snarls and hunts, their eyes hollow. Dust blanketed the ground, disturbed only by their footprints. Lyra froze, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What is this place?" His gaze swept the walls, unreadable. "A passage for those who were never meant to be found." The chamber breathed with silence, so heavy it pressed against Lyra's ears. Dust motes floated in the faint silver glow spilling from his eyes, stirring like restless ghosts. She edged forward, her boots crunching grit beneath them, gaze darting across the carved wolves that seemed to snarl back at her from the walls. "This place." Her voice cracked, small and uncertain. "It feels wrong." "Not wrong," he murmured. "Old, forgotten." Lyra hugged her arms around herself. The air was colder here, biting into her skin. Every line of the stone carvings carried violence, fangs bared, claws extended, wolves locked in eternal hunts. She shivered. A sudden sound split the stillness, a low drawn-out growl, rolling through the chamber like thunder. Lyra's blood froze. Her eyes shot wide. "Tell me, that was you." His head tilted, nostrils flaring. The chain between them rattled as his body went tense, every muscle sharp with alertness. "Not me." The growl came again, this time louder, closer. The walls seemed to vibrate with it, dust shaking loose from the carvings. Lyra stumbled back, pressing herself against the cold stone. "There's something down here," she whispered. His silver gaze cut toward her, steady but fierce. "Not something." An echo. The words made no sense. The sound, though raw, guttural, inhuman, slammed against her chest. She swore she felt hot breath on the back of her neck, though nothing was there. An echo of what? Her whisper barely carried. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the darkness. Of wolves long dead. Of power buried. The growl deepened into a chorus, layered voices, snarling in unison, clawing at the walls of the chamber. Lyra clutched the chain, knuckles white. Panic rose sharp in her throat, but something else stirred beneath it, a strange pull. Like the sound was tugging at her bones. Her knees weakened. "I can feel it." He glanced over his shoulder, eyes burning brighter. "You weren't supposed to." The echo surged, a violent rumble that rattled the carvings. For one breathless moment, Lyra swore the wolves' stone eyes glowed, alive with pale light. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's impossible." The man turned fully toward her now, his presence dominating, the chain tight between them. His voice dropped, deep and unyielding. "Listen carefully, girl. The wolves of this passage are not mere memory. They answer to blood." Her lips parted, confusion warring with fear. "What does that mean?" His jaw clenched. "It means you've awakened something." The chamber roared again, growls, so loud they shook the ground beneath their feet. Lyra pressed her hands to her ears, eyes squeezing shut. She wanted to run, to scream, to vanish. But when she looked up, his gaze locked hers. And her body stilled. The sound dimmed, just slightly, as though bending to his will. And in that fragile quiet, he spoke one word. Low and sharp. Mine. The chamber fell silent. Lyra's breath hitched, her pulse frantic. She couldn't tell if he was claiming her, silencing the echoes, or both. But the word struck through her like a blade, leaving her trembling in its wake. Mine. The word hung in the air like a brand, scorching, undeniable. Lyra's chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, the echo of his voice thundering through her bones louder than the ghostly growls had. Her back pressed against the cold stone. Don't say that. He took one step closer, the chain clinking between them. I don't need to say it. The bond has already begun. Her heart lurched. Bond. Before he could answer, the chamber flared. From the carvings, faint light bled like molten gold seeping from cracks. The wolves etched into the walls shimmered, their snarls alive with an eerie glow. Heat rippled through the air, searing, suffocating. Lyra gasped, staggering back. What's happening? The man turned slowly, eyes narrowing as the glow intensified. His chains rattled violently, sparking against the stone. They've awakened fully. The ground shook. A burst of light erupted from the carvings, spiraling into the chamber's center. Fire, no, not fire, but something brighter, roar spun like chains made of pure flame. They lashed out, striking the floor, walls, air, circling them both. Lyra shrieked, ducking instinctively. The heat scorched close enough to singe her hair. They're going to burn us alive. But the man stood firm, shoulders squared, silver eyes locked on the fiery chains. He raised his bound wrists, defiant. Not us. Me. The flames snapped toward him, wrapping his arms, chest, shoulders. Lyra watched in horror as the fire licked across his skin and didn't consume him. Instead, the metal shackles binding him began to glow red, softening, cracking. Her eyes widened. It's breaking them. He gritted his teeth, the glow painting his features in violent light. This prison was never meant to hold me. The chains of fire tightened, pulling, tearing. With a final wrench, the iron shattered, fragments clattering across the stone floor. Sparks hissed where they landed. Lyra stumbled back, pressing against the wall. For the first time, she saw him unbound. His full height, his shoulders broad, his presence almost too vast for the chamber itself. He turned toward her slowly, the last ember fading from his wrists. You're free, she whispered. All laced with dread, his gaze pinned her, unrelenting. No, girl. We are bound. You broke the seal when you spent your last coin. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to scream that she had no part in this madness. But her trembling hands told another story, and deep in her chest, something burned a faint answering heat that wasn't hers. Behind them, the chamber's glow faded, leaving only the echoes of crackling stone. The silence was almost worse than the roar. Lyra swallowed hard. What are you going to do now? His answer was soft, almost dangerous. Claim what's already mine. Claim what's already mine. The words struck Lyra like another chain, heavier than iron. Her lips parted to speak, but a distant sound cut her off. Boots, clanging armor, torches. The guards. Her pulse leaped. They're coming. He didn't flinch. He tilted his head, listening as though the stone itself whispered their enemy's steps. His silver gaze sharpened. Closer than I thought. The sound grew louder, echoing down the passage. Torches painted the cracks of the sealed entrance in orange. Voices shouted orders. Lyra panicked. There's no way out, they'll trap us. He strode to the far wall, pressing a bare palm against the carvings. The broken shackles still smoked at his feet, a reminder of his unleashed strength. The wolves etched into the stone seemed to respond, faint glimmers rippling across their snarling faces. With a shove, part of the wall cracked open, groaning on hidden hinges. A sliver of damp air seeped through. Lyra's eyes widened. Another passage. He grasped the chain, still binding her wrist. It hadn't broken with his hand tugged. Move. Lyra stumbled forward, her resistance drowned by the crash of stone behind them. The guards had breached the first barrier. Their shouts poured into the chamber. They're here. After them. Lyra and the man darted into the new tunnel, the entrance ceiling behind with a grinding thud. Darkness swallowed them whole. Lyra gasped, unable to see, but his grip was unyielding, guiding her without hesitation. She could hear the guards' fury, fists and weapons pounding against the wall they'd left behind. The sound reverberated like thunder, but the barrier held. Still, it wouldn't last forever. Do you know where this leads? Lyra demanded, breathless. Yes. His voice was calm, too calm. Out, and into deeper danger. Her stomach twisted. What does that mean? Not all who hunt us wear chains and armor. The tunnel sloped downward, the ground slick with moisture. Lyra slipped, nearly falling, but his hand steadied her with iron strength. She hated the way heat rushed through her arm at his touch. Hated the strange mix of safety and terror he carried. I didn't ask for this, she snapped, desperate to mask her fear with anger. I was trying to save you, not whatever this is. He glanced over his shoulder, silver eyes burning faint in the black. And yet here you are, running with me, chained at my side. Do you really think fate doesn't laugh at your intentions? She bit back a retort, heart slamming in her chest. Suddenly, the tunnel widened, spilling them into a cavern. A faint bluish glow shimmered from crystals embedded in the rock, casting eerie shadows. Water dripped into a pool at the center, rippling softly. But the beauty didn't soothe her, because in the shimmering light, shapes moved, not guards. Figures crouched on the cavern's edges. Half shadow, half fleishman, with glowing eyes. Their bodies hunched, jaws stretched too far, teeth catching the crystal light. Wolves, but wrong. Twisted Lyra's breath hitched. What are they? His jaw tightened, eyes locking on the nearest creature. Shadows. Sent to hunt me. The growls began low, hungry, vibrating through the stone. Lyra's hand shook on the chain. She wanted to scream, to run, but the tunnel behind them was sealed. The only way was forward straight into the jaws of these horrors. He stepped ahead, placing himself between her and the creatures, shoulders broad, power humming beneath his skin. His voice rolled like thunder. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, do not run. The shadows lunged. They came fast, faster than Lyra's eyes could follow, jaws wide, claws scraping sparks off stone. The cavern filled with snarls and the screech of claws. Lyra stumbled back, her spine slamming against the damp wall. Her throat tightened, breath caught between a scream and a prayer. The Mano, not a man, not truly moved. With a speed that blurred the air, he intercepted the first creature. The chain on Lyra's wrist yanked hard as he twisted, catching the shadow by its throat. His hand glowed faintly silver where it touched, and the beast shrieked. Body convulsing like smoke, writhing in fire. He flung it aside. It hit the cavern wall and shattered into a cloud of black mist, vanishing like it had never existed. Lyra's knees nearly gave out. Saints above. No time. Another beast lunged, claws swiping for her face. She shrieked, ducking instinctively. A silver blur crossed her vision. He had stepped between them, arm raised. Claws raked across his skin, sparks flying. But no blood flowed. The creature roared, only for him to slam his fist into its jaw. Bone cracked. The beast crumbled into smoke. The cavern erupted with chaos. For more shadows poured forward, circling, growling. Their eyes glowed red in the crystal light. Too many teeth flashing as they snapped and taunted. Lyra pressed against the wall, clutching the chain like a lifeline. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The only anchor was the sight of him standing in the middle of the storm. Silver eyes blazing, every movement sharp and brutal. He caught one shadow twisting its arm until it snapped with a sound that made her stomach lurch. Smoke burst from its body as it dissolved. Another tried to flank him, but he spun, chain whipping through the air. Slicing through the creature's neck, the air grew thick with the scent of burning and ash. The mist of dying shadows choking the chamber. Still, they came. One darted toward Lyra. Her scream tore free as it barreled down, jaws dripping darkness. She raised her hands in useless defense. The chain yanked hard, jerking her sideways. The shadow's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Before it could pivot, he seized it by the spine and slammed it into the cavern floor. The impact echoed like thunder. The beast broke apart in a shuddering cloud. Lyra gasped, clutching her chest. She was shaking too hard to stand. He turned his head toward her briefly, silver eyes fierce. "I told you behind me." She swallowed, forcing words past her terror. They just keep coming. 3 remained, circling in tighter arcs. Their snarls overlapped, hunger vibrating through the rock. His lip curled. "Then I'll keep ending them." The first leaped. He ducked low, shoulder driving into its chest, flinging it into another midair. Both shattered against the cavern wall in a spray of smoke. The last stood its ground. Larger than the others, its glowing eyes fixed on him. Slowly, it padded forward, growl rolling deep, body trembling with restrained fury. Lyra couldn't look away. Unlike the others, this one felt aware, almost intelligent, that the alpha straightened, shoulders squaring. The cavern seemed too still around him, the crystal's glow catching sharp angles of his face. He lifted his chin. "Come." The shadow snarled and obeyed. It lunged, claws extended. He met it head-on, their collision cracking the ground beneath them. The beast thrashed, teeth snapping at his throat. For a moment, they were locked, strength against strength, darkness against silver fire. Then he roared. The sound was primal. Shaking the cavern walls, a voice of command older than stone. The shadow convulsed, freezing in place. Its body shuddered once, twice, then dissolved into smoke, leaving nothing but silence. Lyra pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. The cavern reeked of ash, the crystals dimmed. And he stood alone in the center. Chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. He turned. Eyes finding hers through the haze. "You see now," he said softly, dangerously. "Why they hunt me. Why you should fear me." Her lips parted, but no words came. She only knew her fear wasn't the only thing burning in her chest anymore. The cavern was silent, too silent. Only wisps of smoke curled lazily through the air where the shadow wolves had died, drifting upward before fading into nothing. The crystals embedded in the walls flickered weakly. Their glow dimmed, as if the battle itself had drained them. The stench of ash clung heavy, biting at Lyra's throat with every shallow breath. She pressed a trembling hand against the wall to steady herself. Her knees wobbled, her palms stung from scraping against stone earlier, and her chest still heaved with uneven gasps. Across the chamber, he stood perfectly still. Chains broken, chest bare, and rising with slow control, his silver eyes cutting through the haze like moonlight. He looked untouched, as if the battle had been nothing more than a passing exertion. Lyra's voice broke the silence first, sharp with disbelief. "You," her words, tangled, her throat raw. "You're not human." His gaze flicked to her, unreadable, unshaken. "You knew that the moment you saw me break those walls." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to deny. But the memory of those wolves, dissolving under his hands, creatures that hadn't bled, but turned to smoke burned behind her eyelids. Her voice dropped, softer this time, almost pleading. "Then, what are you?" He didn't move, didn't blink. The wrong question. Lyra clenched her fists. "Don't do that. Don't twist my words. You owe me the truth. I gave everything I had for you." The chain that still bound her wrist clinked as she yanked it, as though she could remind him of her sacrifice. Her last coin, her last shred of hope, poured into that reckless choice. Finally, he shifted. He walked toward her with measured steps, slow and deliberate. Lyra's back hit the stone before she realized she'd been retreating. He stopped, a breath away. Close enough that she could see the faint gleam of sweat at his temple, smell the raw metallic scent of him beneath the ash. His voice dropped low, so low it thrummed through her ribs. "You didn't buy a man, girl. You bought fate." Her heart slammed. The words coiled around her chest, suffocating. "Fate," she spat, anger sparking through the fear. "No, I bought time. I bought a chance to keep a man from being slaughtered like an animal in that market. That's all." Something flickered in his expression, amusement, irritation. It vanished too quickly to name. His hand lifted, brushing the chain that linked them. "Then tell me why your pulse leaps every time I speak. Why your body listens to my command even when your tongue fights me." Heat rushed to her cheeks, traitorous and hot. She shoved the words back with fury. "That's fear. Don't mistake it for anything else." For a long, heavy moment, his silver eyes bored into hers, unblinking, unrelenting. The air grew so thick it was hard to breathe. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped back. The absence of him left her colder than she'd admit. Lyra forced her legs to hold steady as she spoke. Softer now, almost to herself. "I don't even know your name." His back was to her now, shoulders broad in the faint glow as he studied the carved wolves along the cavern wall. When he answered, his tone was flat, stripped of emotion. "Names have power. You'll know mine when you've earned it." Her throat tightened. 1,000 retorts crowded her tongue, but none would land against the weight of his words. She was left with silence, the chain clinking faintly as she lowered her trembling hand. The smoke had finally thinned. The cavern was just stone against cold, cracked, silent. But for Lyra, the echoes of that battle, his voice, and the word fate rattled louder than the growls of wolves ever had. And deep inside, against every frantic denial she tried to build, something inside her whispered he was right. The cavern groaned. Not from wolves this time. Not from clashing chains or breaking stone, but from something quieter, something inside her. Lyra's wrist burned, sudden and sharp. the pain snaking up her arm like fire beneath her skin. She hissed and clutched it with her other hand, stumbling against the wall. The Alpha turned instantly. His eyes narrowed, silver flaring brighter, as they fixed on the point of agony. "What did you touch?" he demanded. "Nothing." She snapped through gritted teeth, sweat prickling along her hairline. Her words, fractured as another wave of heat seared through her wrist. The broken cuff of the slave's chain dangled loose. Yet its metal edge glowed faintly red. Not natural, not molten. Alive. Her breath caught. The chain, he was already moving. In 2 strides, he caught her wrist, his grip firm, almost bruising. She gasped, partly from the pain, partly from his touchy electric commanding. Undeniable. The heat didn't fade when he held her. It deepened, like the flame recognized him. His voice, low and steady, thrummed through the chamber. "The mark begins." Lyra froze. "The what?" He didn't answer immediately. His thumb brushed the inflamed skin, where faint lines were beginning to appear, curling like glowing veins. They weren't burns. They weren't wounds. They were symbols, faint and twisting, emerging like ink drawn from beneath her flesh. Terror jolted through her. She yanked her hand, but his grip tightened. "Let go," she shouted. "Make it stop." His jaw flexed, but he didn't release her. "I can't." The words fell like stone in her chest. "You mean you won't?" His gaze shot to hers, sharp enough to pin her against the wall without a hand. "No, I mean it has already chosen." The lines on her skin glowed brighter, a faint silver now echoing his own eyes. Lyra's stomach turned. She shoved against him, desperate. "This isn't real." It can't be real. But the pain was real. The fire under her flesh was real. And so was the way his presence eased it just slightly, just enough to notice. Her voice cracked with fear. "What is happening to me?" For the first time since she'd met him, something like hesitation flickered in his expression. His grip gentled, though he still held her fast. "The mark binds. It seals. It declares what words cannot." Lyra shook her head violently, hair tumbling into her eyes. "Stop speaking in riddles. Tell me what it means." His silence stretched until she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, at last, his words dropped like iron. "It means fate has chosen you as mine." The cavern seemed to tilt, the floor shoving itself out from under her. Lyra staggered, breath gone, every nerve screaming against what she'd just heard. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. I didn't ask for this. I didn't agree." He cut her off, not with cruelty but with a quiet finality that rooted her to the stone. "It isn't about what you asked. The mark answers to no one. Not me. Not you." Her heart pounded furiously. Rage bled through the terror. "I saved your life. That doesn't mean I gave you mine." Something hardened in his gaze, but beneath it was an edge she couldn't place. Regret, or maybe longing. His fingers lingered at her wrist, tracing the newly etched lines. "Then why?" he said softly, dangerously, "did you spend your last coin for me?" The fire in her arm pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, searing with every word. Her throat closed, no answer forming. Silence thickened between them again, heavier than before, until the cavern seemed to breathe with it. Smoke swirled lazily, catching faint light on the walls. But all Lyra could see was the glow on her skin, and all she could feel was the chain she had thought broken, now remade inside her blood. The Alpha released her at last. The absence of his touch made the pain spike sharper. "Get used to it," he murmured, turning away. The mark never fades. Lyra clutched her wrist against her chest, eyes wide. Heart screaming with the truth she refused to believe. She wasn't chained anymore. She was marked. The cavern hadn't stopped echoing. Even though silence wrapped its walls, Lyra could still hear his words rebounding inside her skull. Fate has chosen you as mine. Her wrist throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat, glowing faint beneath her sleeve, like an ember refusing to die. She pressed her palm over it as if she could smother it. But the heat pulsed defiantly against her touch. The Alpha walked a few paces ahead, broad shoulders shifting as he scanned the jagged shadows for threats. To him, it seemed nothing had changed. To her, everything had. "Stop," she snapped. He froze mid-step, silver eyes narrowing as he glanced back. "We don't have time to linger. I don't care about your time." She stepped forward, voice cracking under the pressure of rage and fear. "You're going to tell me what you've done to me." His head tilted, wolf-like, patient in a way that only made her angrier. "I did nothing." The mark answered on its own. "Don't you dare." Her voice sharpened like a blade. "Don't stand there and act like this is some accident. You knew something would happen when you touched me. You've known since the chains broke." He didn't flinch. Perhaps. The admission hit her harder than denial. Her breath caught, fury sparking like oil meeting flame. "You arrogant," she broke off, fists trembling at her sides. "You think I belong to you, just because your cursed mark decided it." He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, his presence filling the space between them. "It isn't about what I think." His tone was calm, but beneath it ran the edge of command. "It is law older than you, older than me. I don't care how old it is," she shouted. Her voice bounced against the cavern, but she didn't back down. "My life is mine. My choices are mine. You don't get to walk out of some cage and tell me I'm yours." His gaze locked on hers, unyielding. "And yet you are." The simplicity of the words undid her. Not shouted, not snarled spoken, like truth carved into stone. Her chest heaved. She wanted to spit at him, claw at him, run from him, but her wrist pulsed in sync with his nearness, as if her body betrayed her. Her voice dropped to a whisper, edged with steel. "I never wanted you. I only wanted to help." For the first time, his composure fractured. His lips curled in something between a sneer and a smile, bitter and sharp. "Help? You think you helped me? You bought me like cattle at a market." Her stomach twisted. You spent your last coin." His voice rose, not loud but dangerous, each word a cut. "Do you think fate ignored that? You bound yourself to me before the mark ever burned." Lyra's throat tightened, words choking inside her. She had nothing to answer. Nothing that wouldn't sound like excuse. His gaze softened not in kindness, but in something heavier, darker. "You don't understand yet. But you will." "Don't," she snapped, clinging to defiance before it drowned. "Don't speak like you know me. Don't speak like I'm already yours." Silence stretched again, so thick she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then, faintly, voices stirred at the far end of the tunnel. Boots scuffing stone. A torch flicker. The Alpha's head snapped toward the sound, expression hardening instantly. He moved closer, his shadow falling over her. "Enough," he said, low and commanding. "Later we'll finish this. For now you, stay with me." Lyra wanted to scream that she would never stay with him, never follow him, never let some cursed mark dictate her fate. But the heat in her wrist betrayed her again, pulling her toward him even as she bristled. And when the voices grew louder, closer, she realized fury would have to wait. Survival demanded silence, but her eyes still burned with a vow she didn't dare speak aloud. If fate thought it could chain her again, it would learn she knew how to break things, even destiny. The whispers of boots and steel grew sharper. No longer distant echoes, but claws dragging closer. Hungry and certain. Lyra's chest tightened. She pressed herself against the cavern wall, fingers clutching the glowing wrist she wished she could carve off. Her defiance, her fury, they collapsed under the sound of pursuit. The Alpha moved without hesitation. His hand wrapped around hers, not gentle but firm, pulling her away from the wall. His grip was command, not comfort. "Run," he ordered. "I don't. Now." His voice cut her protest in half. Before she could spit back defiance, he dragged her into motion. The cavern air whipped past her face as their steps echoed, stone grinding beneath their boots. Shadows leaped across the walls from the flicker of torches deeper in the tunnels. The passage ahead narrowed, stalactites pressing down like teeth. Lyra stumbled, but his grip on her hand never loosened. "You're going to break my arm," she hissed. "Better broken than severed," he growled back. The clash of voices behind them grew louder. Torches flared orange, spilling light into the black. The hunters were close. Too close. Lyra risked a glance over her shoulder. Shapes moved, fast soldiers with blades drawn, shadow wolves slinking between their legs, eyes glowing like coals. Her stomach lurched. "We'll never outrun them," she gasped. "We won't have to." His words made no sense. She wanted to demand clarity, but there was no time. The tunnel split into two. Without hesitation, he yanked her left. She nearly slammed into the wall with the force of his decision. "You don't even know where this goes," she snapped. "I do. And if you're wrong, then we die quicker." Her laugh came sharp, jagged, comforting. Behind them, the hunters' shouts echoed, splitting as they too reached the fork. Some followed right. Some followed left. The sound of pursuit doubled. Lyra's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She had never run this hard in her life. Not through streets, not through alleys, not through fire. Yet his pace was relentless, tireless, as if stone and shadow bent for him. The tunnel bent downward, steeper and steeper, until it felt less like running and more like falling. Lyra's foot slipped on wet rock, and she lurched forward with a cry. He caught her waist mid-stumble, hauling her upright without breaking stride. His breath was steady, his grip immovable. "Keep your feet under you," he muttered. "Easy for you to say." She snapped back. "You're not made of mistakes and exhaustion." The faintest smirk tugged at his mouth, gone in an instant. "Then stop acting like it." Torches behind flared brighter. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a jagged chamber. Stalactites hung low, dripping with cold water, the floor slick with moss. "Hide," she begged. "Just once, can't we hide? They'll send us. And if we fight, too many." His eyes scanned the chamber, quick and sharp. Then he pulled her toward a narrow crack at the far side, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "You're insane," Lyra muttered. "Do you want to live?" She bit down on her answer and shoved herself through the crack. The rock scraped her shoulders, tore at her sleeves. The Alpha pushed behind her, the heat of his body close enough to drive the burn in her wrist wild. On the other side, they stumbled into another passage, this one lower. Tighter, the ceiling forcing them to crouch. The sound of pursuit muffled slightly, but didn't vanish. Lyra's breath came in ragged bursts. We're rats in a maze. Better rats than corpses. The tunnel sloped upward now, every step dragging against her aching muscles. Still, he moved like a storm contained in flesh, sure of every direction. Finally, the narrow passage spat them into open darker cavern, wide enough to swallow the last one whole. High above, moonlight filtered faintly through cracks in the ceiling, silvering jagged rock. Lyra staggered to a halt, bent double, clutching her knees. Her chest heaved as if her lungs were clawing for escape. The Alpha remained upright, gaze cutting across the chamber. He tilted his head, listening. The voices still echoed behind them, but fainter now. "We're not safe," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "But we bought a breath." Lyra straightened, fury snapping back through exhaustion. "A breath isn't enough. Do you even have a plan? Or are you just dragging me through stone until we both collapse?" He turned to her, silver eyes like moonlight trapped in flesh. "You think I run without purpose?" "Yes," she shouted. "You've done nothing but command and drag and demand, as if my life is just a piece on your board. You talk of marks and fate and chains, but none of it makes sense. I didn't choose this." For the first time since the chase began, he stepped close, so close the heat of his body pressed against her chill. His voice dropped low, every word vibrating through her bones. Double quotes, "No, you didn't choose. But neither did I, and still here we are." Her throat locked, words tangling in her chest. Before she could answer, a howl shattered the chamber. The hunters had followed, and they were closer than either of them feared. The howl still vibrated through the chamber when torches flared at the far tunnel mouth. Shadows spilled forward, twisted figures carrying steel and the promise of death. Lyra's stomach plunged. She stepped back until the jagged wall bit into her spine. "They'll tear us apart." The Alpha's gaze swept the chamber, measuring distance, counting blades, calculating odds. His jaw set. Not in fear but in inevitability. "No." His voice was iron. "They won't touch you." Before she could answer, he reached for her. She flinched as his palm pressed flat against her burning wrist. The glow beneath her skin flared like fire doused in oil, scorching, searing, but his hand held steady. His other hand rose, cutting through the air in a gesture that felt less human than ritual. "What are you?" "Silence," he commanded. His voice deepened, not louder, but heavier. Words poured from his mouth in a tongue she didn't recognize, enchanted, guttural, layered with something more than sound. Each syllable vibrated in her bones, sank beneath her skin. The chamber air thickened. Shadows bent toward him, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. The hunters paused at the tunnel mouth, startled. Even the wolves at their feet whined low, uneasy. Lyra's wrist burned so hot she thought her veins might split. She cried out, trying to wrench away, but his grip was unbreakable. The final word thundered from his chest, echoing into the stone. Then silence, and then light. Her wrist blazed white, brighter than any torch, symbols crawling across her skin like living fire. They stretched upward, spiraling her arm, wrapping her veins in glowing script. She gasped, eyes wide. "What did you do?" His gaze met hers, unflinching. "I bound you to me. With the oath of blood." Her heart seized. "You what?" "It is the only way to shield you from them," he said. Behind him, the hunters began to recover, advancing again with hesitant steps. "They cannot touch what I have claimed." The word claimed struck like a blade. "I am not yours to claim." He stepped closer, his face inches from hers, silver eyes burning with something beyond fury. You think I want this? His voice was sharp, raw. You think I longed for fate to throw you at my feet? No. But the mark chose, and now my oath seals it. The glow pulsed again, beating in rhythm with her heart. She gasped as it spread, faint tendrils etching across her collarbone, burning and soothing all at once. Tears pricked her eyes. You cursed me. I protected you. The clash of steel rang out, guards charging. The Alpha turned, placing himself between her and the oncoming storm. When the first soldier swung, his blade struck an invisible wall. Sparks burst, the steel bouncing back as if colliding with stone. The man reeled, stunned. A hush fell over the hunters. The wolves snarled but refused to cross closer. Lyra stared at her glowing arm in horror. The protection was real. His words weren't lies. The Alpha's chest rose and fell, steady despite the weight of enemies. He glanced back at her, gaze softer now, though still fierce. The blood oath binds me as much as it binds you, he said quietly. Your life is mine to guard. If you fall, I fall. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, curse him, claw him, but the fear in her chest had shifted. Not gone, twisted, confused. The guards regrouped. One snarled, he's using the old ways. Kill them both before it takes root. They surged forward. The Alpha growled, low, primal, and stepped into the charge. His real claws erupted as he struck, rending through steel and flesh. Blood sprayed, mixing with firelight. The chamber roared with chaos. Lyra pressed against the wall, trembling, the glow on her skin pulsing with every strike he made. She felt his movements in her body, the slash of his claws, the grunt of his blows, the rhythm of his heartbeat pounding inside her chest, as if shared. It was unbearable. It was intoxicating. The hunters fell one by one, fear overtaking fury. Soon only a few remained, retreating toward the tunnel. The Alpha stood, drenched in blood, chest heaving, eyes wild. He didn't chase. He only growled, deep and resonant. Until the last man fled into shadow. Silence descended. The glow on Lyra's skin dimmed slowly, settling into faint silver lines etched like scars. She cradled her arm, shivering, her voice cracked. What happens now? He turned, meeting her eyes with a weight that crushed her defiance. Now, you live because I swore it. And you carry the bond because you cannot break it. I'll find a way, she whispered. He studied her a moment longer, then shook his head. No one ever has. The words chilled her more than the cavern air. For the first time, Lyra realized she wasn't just running from guards or wolves. She was running from destiny, and destiny had teeth sharper than chains.